Psychologists studying covert aggression have identified humor as the single most socially protected delivery system for hostility that exists in human behavior, because it arrives wrapped in something that looks like playfulness, and the moment you react to the hostility underneath it, you become the problem. You become too sensitive. You cannot take a joke. This video covers 6 specific signs that the humor in your relationship or close friendship is functioning as a psychological weapon. And number 4 is the one that does the most damage over the longest period of time, precisely because it never once stops smiling while it does it. Because the framing you have probably been living inside sounds something like this. She is just funny. She is sarcastic. That is her personality. That is how she shows affection. And maybe that is partly true. But there is a specific kind of humor that is not affection wearing a sharp edge. It is control wearing a joke as a costume. And the reason it is so difficult to name, the reason you have probably spent more time questioning your own sensitivity than questioning the pattern, is that humor carries a social immunity most forms of communication do not have. You cannot challenge a joke without looking like you have no sense of humor. That social contract, that unspoken rule that jokes are off limits for serious examination, is exactly what makes this particular weapon so effective. It is not your sensitivity that is the problem. It is the architecture of the thing you were handed. Dr. Robin Kowalski at Clemson University, whose research on aversive interpersonal behaviors has been published across over 30 peer-reviewed studies, found that humor used as a veiled aggression strategy produced measurably higher psychological distress in recipients than direct criticism, specifically because the indirect delivery prevented the target from mounting a clear emotional or cognitive defense. The nervous system registered the threat, the social context prohibited the response, and the gap between those two things, the threat that arrived and the response that was not allowed, is where the damage accumulated quietly over time. Think about the last time something landed as a joke that left you sitting with a feeling you could not justify out loud. A comment about something you are sensitive about, delivered with a laugh. An observation about your behavior in front of other people that everyone else found funny. And afterward, the private mental gymnastics. Am I being too sensitive? Was that actually fine? Why does this keep bothering me when it is technically just humor? That internal confusion is not a sign of your oversensitivity. It is a sign that something real happened, and the packaging it arrived in made it impossible to address directly. 2 of these 6 signs will feel like small things. They are not. The small ones are the ones that have been running longest. The first sign is called targeted vulnerability humor. This is when the jokes consistently land on the specific things you have shared in private, your insecurities, your fears, your past, the things you disclosed in a moment of genuine trust, and get repackaged as comedic material in social settings. The amygdala processes this as a double betrayal. The original vulnerability was used rather than held, and the public setting removes your ability to respond without appearing dramatic. What makes this sign distinct from simple teasing is the specificity. It is not random. It gravitates toward the exact coordinates of where you are most exposed. That is not accidental. Weaponized humor always knows where to aim. The second sign is called audience activation. Humor used as psychological control almost always has a preferred performance context. It arrives most frequently in front of other people. This is not coincidence. The presence of an audience serves 2 functions. It amplifies the humiliation by adding witnesses, and it creates a social pressure that prevents any response. The dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, which processes social pain using the same neural pathways as physical pain, registers public humiliation as a threat at a significantly higher intensity than private criticism. The joke that would be manageable one-on-one becomes something much larger in a room full of people laughing. And the laughter of others is used, consciously or not, as a form of social proof, validation that the target is the unreasonable one if they object. The third sign is plausible deniability as default. Every time you attempt to address the humor directly, every time you say that hurt or I did not like that, the response follows a predictable structure. It was just a joke. "You are so sensitive. I was kidding. Why are you making this into something?" The deniability is not incidental. It is the architecture. A weapon that can always be disavowed is a weapon that never has to be put down. What this sign produces over time is a specific kind of self-doubt, a gradual erosion of your ability to trust your own perception of what happened. Because every time you name the thing is retroactively reclassified as nothing. Psychologists call this gaslighting by humor. Your nervous system knows what it felt. The social framing keeps telling it that it was wrong. Let me be honest with you right here. If you have spent time in a dynamic like this, some part of you already knows the difference between a joke that lands warm and a joke that lands like a small controlled demolition. You have always known. The confusion was not about whether something was happening. The confusion was about whether you were allowed to say so. The fourth sign, the one doing the most work, is called identity reduction comedy. This is the pattern where humor consistently reduces you to a single unflattering characteristic, repeated so often and so publicly that it begins to function as a social identity assigned to you without your consent. You become the one who is always late, always overthinking, always too emotional, always bad with money, not because those things are comprehensively true, but because the repetition of the joke calcifies them into how others see you, and eventually into how you see yourself. Neuroscientifically, this exploits the mere exposure effect in reverse. Repeated exposure to a characterization of yourself, even one delivered as comedy, increases the degree to which that characterization integrates into your self-concept. The joke becomes the story. The story becomes what you believe about yourself. And she never once had to say it seriously for it to do serious damage. The fifth sign is humor as hierarchy maintenance. Dr. Judith Hall at Northeastern University, whose research on nonverbal and verbal dominance in relationships spans over 2 decades, found that in relationships with covert power imbalances, humor was used disproportionately as a mechanism to reinstate hierarchy after moments where the balance had shifted. After your success, your recognition, your confidence, your growth. The joke arrives precisely when you have expanded. It is designed to resize you, and it is delivered with a smile so that the resizing cannot be named as what it is. If you notice that the humor intensifies specifically in the moments when you feel most yourself, most confident, most visible, most expanded, that pattern is information. Comfort with your growth is not what is driving it. The sixth sign is selective warmth calibration. This is the subtlest and the most destabilizing over time. The humor is not constant. There are genuine moments of warmth, real laughter, connection that feels like what you wanted this to be. And that inconsistency, the cycling between the weaponized and the warm, is not incidental to the dynamic. It is the mechanism that keeps you inside it. The dopamine system, which learns through variable reinforcement, becomes most attached not to consistent reward, but to unpredictable reward. The warmth after the weapon does not cancel the weapon. It makes the entire system harder to leave. Because you keep waiting for the warm version. Because you have seen her. Because she exists. And the nervous system will hold on to evidence of the real thing long past the point where the pattern has told you everything you need to know. None of this requires her to be a villain. People learn to use humor as protection, as control, as a way of maintaining distance or power, usually because somewhere earlier in their life those tools felt necessary. Understanding the mechanism does not mean accepting the cost of it. You were not too sensitive, you were accurate. And the fact that you kept questioning your own perception instead of the pattern, that is what this particular dynamic is designed to produce. You just got the name for it. That is where it starts losing its grip. There is a piece underneath this that we did not get to. The specific psychological profile of why someone develops this pattern, what it is protecting, and what it tells you about what they actually need. Without that piece, you will understand what is happening, but you will not understand who you are actually dealing with. And those are 2 very different levels of clarity. That is what comes next.